Hey everybody, today I'm showing you how you can recreate this landscape painting with gouache. I'm using my Hahnemühle 100% cotton watercolor sketchbook here, just a plate and mostly Winsor & Newton designer's gouache with a couple of tubes from Holbein. You can use any kinds of colors, any kind of gouache for this tutorial. You don't have to completely recreate my colors. I'm using a range of brushes, mostly round brushes, a smaller size 2 DaVinci Casaneo brush, and a mid-size brush from Staedtler. And here is my sketch. Here you can see it better. It can be a little bit messy, it doesn't matter because we're going to paint over it anyways. You can recreate this sketch. And now I'm using a kneaded eraser, as you can see. So I'm lightening up the sketch just gently. And then I'm mixing a very light color. It has a lot of white and a little bit of yellow in it. And these colors are not set in stone yet that I'm using here because I went back and forth a little bit with this sky and with the sun in particular, because this has a little bit of a gradient around the sun, and I just play around with these things a lot until they look the way that I want to. You can see right now it's a rather smooth gradient, but I really like it when you can see the lines and the brush strokes with these things, so it looks a little bit more impressionistic. So that's what I'm gonna do later. And the sun is yellow in the middle, then it goes into orange. I also added in a little bit of purple later, and here you can see me coloring in the sky color. It is this lovely bright and also a little bit muted blue tone, and I'm kind of painting around my subjects loosely, so this way I don't have to layer as much. This is especially a good idea if you're using more affordable gouache, because the more affordable gouache doesn't layer as well, and also if you're a beginner and aren't used to layering as much. You can see right now I'm adding in purple, a little bit of a magenta as well, so that the gradient works a little bit better, and also added in a little bit more of these brush strokes that I really like it when you can see them. You can blend that out if you want to. Just play around with this. I know that these tutorials are super fast because it's a YouTube video, but feel free to pause at any point and just take your time with these things, play around. I'm painting around my subjects rather loosely, and I'm not worrying too much if I go over the lines a little bit. Mainly I'm trying to keep the sketch in place so I still know where everything's going to go, but I'm going to fill in all of these foreground elements anyways, all of these leaves, branches, the mushrooms. I'm going to color over that, so you don't have to think about being extremely careful with this at this point, especially since I was playing around with the sun and with these strokes so much. I didn't want to worry too much about going over the foreground elements, and so this was a rather messy step, and that's okay. Gouache is very forgiving in that. And now I'm mixing this blue tone. This is a blue tone that has a little bit more green in it. It goes a little bit more towards the turquoise, and this is what I used for the water in the foreground. And now I'm mixing my first green tone. This is a very light, warm green tone. Green, yellow, maybe a little bit of orange you can put in there, so you will get a warm green tone. And you can see that I filled this kind of mid area of our piece here with that. And again, I painted around these elements, all of those leaves that are more in the foreground. If this tutorial is a little bit too fast for you and you want something that you can follow along to more step by step and much slower, then I recommend checking out my courses. I have a gouache course in which you can learn how to recreate this landscape painting. So if that's something that you're interested in, check out the link in my description that will take you to my courses. Now I'm using a darker green tone for these kind of hills that are a little bit more towards the foreground. I painted one on the left and one on the right, so it's a little bit balanced, but I didn't give every one of these elements the same color, so we have a little bit of a variety. I also missed a few spots here with the green and the blue, so I filled those in at this point as well, and I just went over areas that were still looking a little bit rough. Sometimes you need more than one layer. It also kind of depends on your paints and how much water you used for your layer. The more water generally you use, the higher the chance that you might have to do more than one layer. You can see here I'm mixing a brown tone, and I was going back and forth a little bit with this tone. I ended up with this color that I really liked, and I filled my tree in this color. And you can mix a brown tone with different methods. I mostly used green and orange, I believe, for this brown tone. You can also add in a little bit of a black tone and really just mix until you're happy with what you have. Here I added in a little bit of black and painted this foreground element with this slightly darker and more muted brown tone, so that the color of the tree in the background kind of repeats in the foreground. That's going to make the piece look a little bit more balanced. And then I mixed a very dark green tone for the leaves of the tree. It almost looks black on camera, but it is a very, very dark green tone. I used a little bit of black here, a little bit of green, and you can just mix a tone that you like and add colors that you want. Like I said in the beginning, you don't have to use exactly the same colors that I'm using. I know when I'm following a tutorial, that is something that I usually get caught up on, so I need that reminder as well. But this piece is generally going to look good if you generally have similar values in your piece. So the main thing here is that you have enough contrast between the elements. So in this case, the foreground elements at this point are darker. So the leaves that are more towards the viewer and all of the branches that are closer to us are a little bit darker. I also added in lighter elements in the foreground later on, but at this point, that's kind of a rule that we're following, that the hill that's more farther away is a little bit lighter, and the ones that are more towards us are a little bit darker. And now you can see the leaves that I'm right now coloring in are a little bit darker than the hill and a little bit brighter than the hill that's towards the viewer, if that makes sense. So you just have to make sure that you can see all of the colors that you're using well against the backgrounds, essentially. If you want to change your colors and use different colors, for example, you can use more orange tones. If you want to go more for an autumn look, then you can do exactly the same things that I did here, just with different colors. And just make sure that there's always enough contrast between all of the elements so you can see them well. You can see that I used the same or similar green tones for this small tree than I did for the leaves on the right side, and also the greenery towards the water. And now I'm using the darker brown tone again, and then a lighter brown tone. I'm trying to repeat the colors throughout the piece, but varying them a little bit. And now I'm using the darkest tone for the leaves, and this is just a very dark tone that I had on my palette. You can use a dark green, a black color, a dark blue tone, whatever gives you enough contrast between this color and this hill area. And now I'm using very light tones for the mushrooms and then a pink tone, and also making sure that we can see these colors in front of the sky. I wanted to use some pink tones for the mushrooms here because we have a few pink tones in the sky as well around the sun, and again I wanted to repeat those colors a little bit, and I think it adds a little something, a little more color. And then I'm adding in more of the leaves from the tree because it was still looking a little bit bare. I felt like it needed some more. And to add some variation, I also did leaves in other colors. So now we're introducing lighter leaf tones as well. And you can see that against the stem of the tree, this is still visible, this lighter tone. So we still have enough contrast so you can see that. Here it's getting a little bit more tricky. I tried to make this tone as light as possible, but there could be a little bit more contrast there, but it's not too bad. And I added a few veins to those leaves, and then I also filled in the waterfall because it's still bare. This is the last thing that I filled in here on this piece actually before we add more details. And I used some lighter blue tones for this, and then very, very light blue tones for this water area where we would have some kind of foam. And this is mostly white with a little bit of blue in it. Also a few details added to the water and around where this river would flow. And I just thought about what kind of movement the water would be making and tried to make a few lines to show that. And then I used a lighter tone here for the hill as well to just make it pop a little bit more just on top of that hill because I thought that the light would hit it there. And then a few details on our mushrooms. And this is the most fun part where we're finishing off the piece and adding in a few details. And you can see that I mixed this tone that's a lot lighter than the foreground here, and it is this very muted green, so it's not too bright, it's not the focus of the piece. I want the focus of the piece to be more towards the sun and the mushrooms, and so these colors are a little bit more muted so they don't pop out as much, but you can see them really well against that background. And just mixed a few more colors for the details. You can see now I'm using a lighter brown tone, so this is a brighter version of the tree of the brown that we had earlier, and I'm just adding in a few lines just very messily. This is an organic shape, and now we are already finished. This is the finished piece. I hope that you enjoyed this piece, and if you recreate it, then tag me on Instagram at visualmindart. And for more gouache painting ideas, check out this video next.